You said a leader is an individual, or rarely a set of individuals, who significantly affects the thoughts, feelings, and/or behaviors of a significant number of individuals. You also added that leaders fashion stories, principally stories of identity. Would you care to comment on that?
When I began to think about leadership, I realized that leaders have to be able to reach many different kinds of people. Again, unless they're leading just a club of their family, say. And so I said, what sorts of things seem to be most universal in human contact? And it became evident to me that except for music, which doesn't carry any kind of semantic message, narrative, stories they're the universal communication form. I mean, we start to tell stories to our children when they're very young. Religious leaders tell parables all the time. And the media what do people watch the most? They watch stories of various sorts, whether it's movies or television or radio or the books that they read or what they watch on YouTube, whatever the medium is. So stories are universal. The problem is, or the challenge is, that even by the time you're 5, you've heard dozens, maybe hundreds of stories with Mother Goose, nursery rhymes, Grimm's fairy tale, Harry Potter, Star Wars. I'm just mentioning stuff my kids and grandkids now would know. So what makes a story grab your attention? If the story is too odd, if it's too bizarre, you might sort of scratch your head and notice it, but it'll be forgotten because you have nothing to assimilate it to. If the story is too familiar, you kind of nod your head, but then you go on to the next, to the next story, so to speak. Indeed, as a kid, I watched a lot of TV, way too much, and when you've heard the plot 100 times before, you don't remember the TV show from the last night because it's too similar to the earlier Lone Ranger or the earlier Perry Mason or the earlier All in the Family, whatever the TV show is. So the first trick of the story is that it needs to be different enough so it captures your attention. You say, wow, this is something that I haven't heard before. But at the same time, it can't be so bizarre that you can't assimilate it cognitively. So those are the stories which I think leaders look for. But it can be a story that is interesting and holds your attention, but as you were saying, Walter, if it doesn't have an affective connection to you, it's unlikely to be very memorable. And probably the affective connection is most likely to happen when it triggers something about yourself. Maybe not yourself necessarily in a narcissistic way, but your family, your situation, the problems that you're dealing with, the problems you're dealing with work, with your family, vice versa. And so it's those stories which I think are the ones that are arresting and compelling. And when I wrote my book, Leading Minds, to which you referred, I picked 11 people, I think it was 11, right. And in each case, I said, these are people who are really able to move large numbers of other people by their stories. And mostly I chose people whom I admired. So if you said that I pick ethical leaders, most of the leaders I would say I was considered ethical. But one of the leaders I portrayed was Margaret Thatcher. And my wife said, why are you writing about Margaret Thatcher? She's such a terrible person. So I said, well, Ellen, first of all, we don't know her. We don't know if she's a terrible person. I said, but she actually has changed the way people in England think about their country and what they think is what is right and wrong. The closest analogy would be Ronald Reagan in this country, but I think he achieved less than Margaret Thatcher did. We could argue about that. And I said, if you want to understand leadership, you can't simply look at people whom you admire. You have to look at people who've managed to change minds. And I think Margaret Thatcher was quite effective in doing that.
We're shaped and formed by our stories. And as a matter of fact, we don't know what we are supposed to do unless we know what story we are a part. Would you care to comment on how that is in alignment with your understanding of the citizen?
Sure. Well, I agree very much with most of what you said. Namely, even if leaders are entirely authentic and are entirely telling you what they really believe, the notion that they can get up one day and just do it without having a lot of practice and a lot of feedback is ridiculous. Every leader that I know about spend a lot of time trying things out, failing, picking themselves up,